Suomi ja muut Pohjoismaat kansainvälisen sijoittajan näkökulmasta.
Tervetuloa minunkin puolestani tähän Newsecin Tulevaisuusstudioon. We have very interesting guest today. We have Michael Svang from the Blackstone Group joining us. Michael is a senior managing director in Blackstone Group based in London. He oversees Blackstone's real estate acquisitions in Europe, and Blackstone is a global leader in real estate investments with worth of $208 billion worth of assets under management. Blackstone is also a very active investor in Nordic countries and in Finland. And they are controlling over 10 billion euros worth of assets and real estate here in Nordics at the moment. So let's welcome Michael Svang to join us. Michael, can you hear me?
I can hear you well. Thank you so much, Mikko. I'm really happy to be here.
Excellent.
I wish I was there in person with you, but it's a nice. It's nice anyway to be on the video.
Great, and it's actually a pleasure to have you here in Newsec Future Studio. Thanks for joining us. First, I have to ask a question: how you work in London? Are you working remotely from the home, or are you actually at the office?
I'm in the office actually. I've been back more or less full time in the office for the past couple months actually, and even especially in the last couple weeks, starting to travel a bit more. So it's starting to feel more and more like pre-COVID times, which is definitely welcome after it going on a year and a half now of disruption. Certainly a bit more less efficient going through the airport with fewer flight schedules and a lot of forms and COVID tests to take, but it's starting to feel like normal life again, which is nice.
I know how you feel, and hopefully we in Finland also opening up a bit, and we are back to the office very quickly. Hopefully autumn by the end of this year. So hopefully we have you here back physically back to the Helsinki very soon.
I'm looking forward to it.
Great. As you know, we have had this seminar every year, and last year we had it also when the COVID-19 was full on. And since then, the market has opened and the transaction volume is picking up and recovering in all the Nordic countries at the moment. How have you changed your investment strategy going back one and a half year to this day? What has changed in your investment strategies in Europe and maybe globally also?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I would say that for the most part, actually, I wouldn't say not to give you a boring answer, but I wouldn't say we've had to change our investment strategy too much. As you mentioned, we're fortunate that we have fairly sizable funds to deploy on behalf of our investors, and as a result of that, what we have found makes sense for us strategically is we're fairly thematic investors. We're trying to find sectors, mega trends, countries, things on a significant scale where we think there's the potential for outsized growth. And I would say, as you look at what's happened, leading into COVID and over the last 12, 18 months as well, we're fortunate. I think the sectors that we had been most active in recent years, thinking about things like logistics, rental housing, things like that, which, frankly, overlap pretty nicely with some of the sectors that can be considered, relative winners, if you will, coming out of COVID. That has, in some ways, it feels good to be validated to some extent, but also, unfortunately, does make it a little bit more challenging to find interesting opportunities in those themes. So, I think for us, kind of continue to think the way that we have been, thinking about now, COVID does change a little bit how people behave and how the world is is developing. So we have to be nimble and entrepreneurial about finding, what are those next trends that we should be thinking about, and trying to find those niches. And I would say maybe, one concrete way that maybe our investment strategy has changed to some extent is historically we have not really been big developers. We're rarely the people that go buy a piece of land and develop something. It's just not, we just haven't focused on that historically. But as some of the sectors and themes that we are quite optimistic about today, whether that's life sciences, offices, lab space, or even cinema studios and content creation, you're starting to see us change a little bit our strategy to access those themes, which, particularly in a European context, maybe aren't very well established sectors. So in the UK, for instance, we've, quite recently, it's been publicly announced, we're making some big developments in both life sciences and studios. And so that going earlier in the life cycle of the property is maybe something that is relatively newer for us than that's come out in the last couple of months.
Okay, very interesting answer, even though you said it's boring, but good answer. As you know, Newsec is strong at the Nordics. We have over 2,000 people working in Nordic countries and the Baltics. And it's actually our home ground. How do you see Nordic market from the investor's perspective? Now, of course, which countries or cities are interesting for you, and maybe the asset classes where you are investing?
Yeah, so we have a few different fund mandates investing in Europe. We don't actually specifically have any allocations to any country or specific sector that we're trying to hit. We're just looking at what we think is the most attractive risk-adjusted opportunity for our investors. But as we look across Europe today, and frankly over the last couple of years, we love the Nordics. To put it bluntly, we've tried to be a very active investor over the last couple of years. We absolutely plan to be for the coming years as well. And from a high-level perspective, I think what's really attractive about the region to us, and certainly other people too. I think you're seeing more and more international investors that are trying to be active there. It's obviously a very highly educated, very entrepreneurial, very wealthy, fairly stable from kind of every perspective, which makes, as you look around the rest of Europe, which makes it a very attractive region and place to invest. So we like the region more broadly. That said, we are specific in what we look after. It's not that we want to invest just in X country. So the way that we think about it is, okay, we like this sector in that country, or this asset class in that city. And I think within each of the countries in the Nordics, we are very happy to invest. What we'll do in each country depends a little bit on the city and what the opportunity is. But if you look at some of our where have we been most active in the Nordics? In recent years, it's probably been logistics is most publicly where we've been active, and that's frankly across the region in each of the 4 countries. I think we would like to continue that. We've also been, maybe somewhat surprisingly, we've also been fairly active in office, and I think there will continue to be good opportunities in office. Earlier this year, we bought an office building in Stockholm, in Södermalm, that we're really excited about. And we have a big office portfolio in Finland, as you know, and we've continued to see really strong momentum there as well. So we big fans of the region, and frankly are looking forward to being active across sectors and frankly across each of the countries.
It's interesting to hear that the offices are investment class for you also still. And we all know that the remote working is here to stay. There will be new ways of working, and also tenant requirements for the offices will change. How has this affected your view on office investment?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think it's one that certainly we have debated and continue to debate a lot internally. And I know a lot of people in the real estate industry spend a lot of time thinking about. I wouldn't say I have the answer. But what I think we feel pretty confident in is that there will continue to be, absolutely continue to be a use for office going forward, and that there will be, very interesting investment and asset management opportunities in the office sector for investors like us. And I think, my opinion is, I think in an environment where more people are working from home, I think you have some companies that maybe want to go fully remote, but I think my feeling is, anecdotally and looking at surveys, that most organizations will at least have some part-time element in the office. And if you're someone that's working remote part of the time and coming to the office, I think it does put demands on what kind of office experience an employer is offering their employee. I think it will put more pressure on employers to offer the right kind of office space in the locations where people actually want to come to, with the right kind of floor plan and layout and fit out. So I think for high quality offices, there will continue to be tremendous demand. And we've seen that across our portfolio, even in the last couple of months, where in Berlin and actually in Helsinki as well, we've signed leases at about at or near the highest levels that have ever been signed in those cities. So we feel pretty confident that if you can create the right product in the right location, office will continue to be a very interesting asset class to be an investor in.
Very interesting. I totally agree that the offices are here to stay, and they will be needed. So very good answer. I have to ask, what are the sort of asset classes in the Nordics that are really a no-go for you guys? Or is there any?
I would not say there's any no-goes. I think, there are things where we maybe have less a strategic view, but I think in some case, it's hard to say that there's anything we wouldn't buy at the right price. I think it's more one of those sectors where we're more, we're more optimistic about rental growth. That's maybe an easy way to think about it. So logistics is obvious. We've touched on office in the right locations. We've touched on rental housing is another one that we have not talked about that we continue to think is interesting, particularly in Finland. So there are a lot of sectors, and I wouldn't say that there's anything that we absolutely wouldn't do.
Okay, so you want to keep all the doors open and look all the opportunities that there are. Excellent. As you know, the Nordic country economics are extremely good and improving near future. And we also have seen that the real estate investment market looks very good in the Nordic countries also, basically all countries. But is there any large challenges or what are the biggest challenges you have when you're investing in Nordic countries? You already mentioned that there are some challenges, but what kind of challenges you're facing?
Yeah, from a very practical perspective, some of the challenges that we have had historically in the Nordics is, we're a big investor, from us in London, and so for us, what is our competitive advantage in many cases? It's larger, complex opportunities where they're the size of our funds and maybe our kind of financial background allows us to look at opportunities that are maybe challenging for other people. And that we've been very fortunate over the last couple of years to find some really interesting opportunities like that in the Nordics. But a lot of times for us, the typical transaction size of 50 million euros, 60 million euros is often a bit small. And so so that's finding the right opportunities for us is always a challenge. In the Nordics, I think otherwise, frankly, quite easy to do business in a nice way. I think it's transparent. People are open-minded and welcoming, and it's just a good place to do business. I think from a broader perspective, the challenges that we face is what's next in terms of what are our next themes. Logistics and some of these other things I mentioned have been really interesting for us over the last couple of years. So figuring out what those next opportunities are is where we spend a lot of our time thinking.
Great. And as we are in a future studio now, and we should also then talk about the data and digitalization. As you know, we at Newsec, we have many ongoing development projects on this field, and also our clients have a lot of data and digitalization related projects that are ongoing and and where we are helping them also. But how about Blackstone? How is digitalization and big data changing your ways of working, or is it really?
It absolutely is, and it's something that we're spending a lot of time and resources on, kind of making sure that we are not just up to speed with what's going on, but trying to be forward-leaning and thinking about the future in terms of where things are going from a digitalization perspective. I think from take it from a couple of different elements. I think from our existing portfolio, from a management perspective, thinking about data, how do we collect data for our tenants? How do we aggregate that data to be better managers of our portfolios? A huge focus. Similarly from making an investment standpoint, there's a lot of data out there that can help you make more informed decisions. And I think one of the interesting things about where we're fortunately well placed is because we have a very large portfolio. There's a lot of data that we can aggregate from properties that we own. So that's something that we're highly focused on, and also. For instance, we have at Blackstone a data science team that helps us underwrite properties by, going very granular into kind of non-traditional data sources, if you will, to help kind of give us an edge when we're looking at and analyzing opportunities. And then I would say, also, there's an investment thesis element to that in data and digitalization. I think, probably the most obvious example of that is in the data center space. Which is certainly an asset class that is growing significantly. I think the stat that I've heard, which I find very interesting, I think is in the last 2 years, I think there's been more data created than in the previous history combined. And those growth rates just continue to accelerate. So as you think about from a real estate perspective and where do you want to be investing, that's a tremendous tailwind to be investing in front of. So we spend a lot of time thinking about that too in terms of informing our investment decisions.
Well, that's great to hear. It looks like the Newsec is also thinking the same way. So I think we are all in the right track, but it's a long way, and the data is very valuable at the moment.
Absolutely.
And then we have these 3 letters, ESG. You might have heard of them, and there have been a lot of discussion and actions around it. And for Newsec, as a service provider and as a company, it's a very important topic. And we also see that the investors are more and more aware of the elements that are related to the environment and sustainability. And I would like to hear from you, what does it really mean for Blackstone? How does it actually affect your daily business or investments? How do you take these kind of topics? How do you value them when you are making investments?
It's super important. It's always been an important part of what we do and how we think, and being a responsible investor and stakeholder, and integrating these principles that ESG broadly refers to is super important into everything that we do. And even if you don't care about what those 3 letters stand for on a personal level, which we obviously do, but even if you didn't, it's something that is so important in terms of what do our investors care about, what do tenants care about, what do people that ultimately want to acquire buildings from you care about. So it's becoming a huge part of day-to-day life in the investing and management, asset management business, which I think is great. So as you think about what we're doing as a firm, we have different initiatives, environmental, on our real estate investments, we've committed to reducing carbon emissions where we control energy usage. In our other business, we've been investing significantly in renewable energy assets. And that's been something we've been doing for a long time, working on different social and diverse representation on portfolio board companies. There's a handful of different initiatives that are obviously things that are good to do in and of a vacuum. But I think for real estate investors that, are maybe thinking that ESG is not so important, I think that's short-sighted. And I think it's, every day more and more, we're seeing how important it is to be thoughtful and forward, on the front foot around these points from, capital markets, a leasing, a sale perspective.
And then finally, Michael, I will hand over to you the crystal ball. This is a future studio where we are at the moment. And I would like to see or hear from you what are the major changes that will affect the real estate market for during the next 3 to 5 years. You can mention a couple of them. Maybe you're not willing to tell us everything, but just tell us something. What do you see?
Happy to. I think to start with a couple easy ones that we've hit on already. I think ESG and technology, I think, will continue to be a huge, continue to have a huge impact on the industry and the way that everyone does business. And I think that's obvious in a way. And I think, as ESG, does that create investment opportunities at some point that buildings that aren't maybe carbon efficient today, retrofitting those, figuring out a way to do that efficiently. Maybe that's something interesting that comes out of it. I think technology, whether that's the way that we work in terms of being able to do site tours virtually, whether that's changes to distribution networks because driverless trucks are now used in logistics. There's all sorts of ways where this will continue to impact. And I think maybe from a slightly more granular, important from a cash flow perspective, I think as we think about these trends, whether it's technology, ESG, I think one thing that's pretty clear is that's going to require more investment from landlords. So increasing CapEx requirements, I think, is something we'll continue to see. Another theme, which I think has already started in many cases, is probably increased taxation. Maybe this isn't new age or that interesting from that perspective, but I think as you look at changes to transfer tax, carbon taxes, changes to capital gains tax treatment, you're seeing these sorts of things, frankly, in many countries in Europe, and I think that will likely continue. And then as you think about the business overall, and I think the investment management business in real estate, I think you've started to see this already, and I think you'll continue to see it, which is that you see more of the same managers doing different things, whether that's people like us diversifying into, away from only having value-add opportunistic vehicles to having core plus and other types of money, and many other private equity investors are doing similar, or investors getting into different strategies or niches than they maybe had in the past. I think that's something that will continue over the coming years. But I think for us, however it ends up, I think, we look forward to continuing to be active investors, and particularly in the Nordics.
Very interesting. I guess that also gives us a guideline for Newsec also where to put some efforts and resources in the future. So because we want to be in the forefront of advising and helping you guys to make excellent investments in the Nordics. Michael, thanks a lot for joining our future studio. I think we have all received very valuable insights how Blackstone sees the real estate investment market now and what are the future drivers in Europe, but also especially in the Nordics. Once more, I want to thank you for joining us, and I wish you a great day and weekend back there in London. Thanks a lot.
Suomi ja muut Pohjoismaat kansainvälisen sijoittajan näkökulmasta.